Okay, well, I'd like to welcome you guys to today's professional development. I'm really glad you guys stuck around. I know it's a half a day, and we all had stuff to do, like report cards and grades and FAP notes and progress notes. And you really want to be doing that right now, but thanks to you helping me out with my graduate studies at ODU, you're all here for this professional development. So since you did take time out of your day, I did get you guys a little gift box with some stuff in it.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. I love frogs.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, and I've all gave you guys folders that contain what we're going to go over today. It's pretty brief, but there's a lot of good information in there. If you want to go ahead and get out your the breakdown of what we're going to do today, it should be in your packet. Of course, first we're going to do the introduction. Of course, you guys know me, but for the people who will be watching on YouTube, my name is Roy Sanders. I teach school at Minnekit Wise here in Wise County, and I'm currently doing the Educational Leadership Program at Old Dominion University. And I'm nearing the end of my studies, and this is the first professional development that I've had to present. So I'm kind of excited about it. You guys can see the rest of this. We'll go through it as we get through the presentation. Background information. As you see here, we got Y centers. This is going to be about center-based learning. So throughout all of my courses at ODU, we've always talked about having a shared leadership, shared vision, guiding principles, which we do have here at Minnekit through Lutheran Family Services. And one that is constant that I've discussed with my boss about, and I'm sure you guys hear this at your schools, is that the kids are number one. So of course, our mission is to produce kids who can not only pass SOLs and pass curriculum, but can also interact and be successful in the world. Whether they have a job, whether they stay at home, when they have a family, just making sure they have those skills that are going to allow them to succeed. And that's, we'll get into a lot of good reasons why center-based learning is great, but, in centers, they get to work together. So not only are you seeing how smart they are, but you're seeing how they interact once they're with other people. This, of course, says we all have a shared vision, which I've stated. We want to produce kids who can do more than just, repeat what's on the SOL. And I know the state requires we do that, but that's where you get into this topic. How are you teaching your class? Most of your leaders are going to be wanting you to, of course, include rigor in your classroom. You have to keep these kids on their toes, especially a lot of the old school principals and teachers. They want to have the students busy, have them engaged, have everyone doing what they're supposed to, but sometimes that doesn't always happen. And that's where you've got to work in some fun. We know that kids today, they play games, they stay in the house, they have to be engaged, and it has to be fun. So it's really tough balancing rigor and fun. And you'll see, why this ties in with center-based learning and some of the other things I'm going to talk about. But this is a quick video that just kind of shows a spoof of how tough things can be for us teachers sometimes. So I'm going to play this, and it's only, I think it's 3 minutes long.
Miss Smith, I need to talk with you about your students' performance.
Of course. I am doing the best I can, but their performance is not improving.
Your test scores seem to indicate that your class is not rigorous enough. Do you include rigor in your class assignments?
My students are either on or below grade level, so I'm not sure how you expect me to include rigor. But yes, I include rigor in my assignments.
We need rigor in all class assignments. Have you told your students that your assignments will be rigorous?
Yes, I said, class, our assignments will be rigorous.
And are your assignments rigorous?
Yes, my assignments are rigorous.
How do you know?
Most of my students are failing our unit on parts of speech. They say it's because my class is too rigorous.
Your students wouldn't fail if they cared about your lessons. Do they care about your lessons?
They don't seem to.
How do you know?
They said, we don't care about parts of speech.
Is that because your assignments trigger us?
The students say they are too rigorous. I said to them, you have been learning parts of speech since 2nd grade. How can you still not know parts of speech? And they said, we don't care about parts of speech.
Research shows that students can do rigorous work if the lessons are fun. Are your lessons fun?
Parts of speech are not fun. But yes, my lessons are fun.
Tell me about your first lesson.
I made up a song for every part of speech and the students helped me make up a dance to go with the song.
Was it fun?
Yes, it was fun.
How do you know?
The students said, this is fun. But they still didn't know the parts of speech.
Tell me about your next lesson.
I brought in different flavors and colors of pudding. The students got to finger paint the parts of speech with pudding and then eat their favorite parts of speech. I mean, pudding.
Was it fun?
Yes, it was fun.
How do you know?
The students said, this is fun.
Then did they know the parts of speech?
No, not very well.
Did you ask the students why they didn't know the parts of speech?
Yes, they said, we do not care about parts of speech.
Perhaps they would care more about parts of speech if your class was more rigorous.
I hate my life.
Okay, so now hopefully none of us get to that point where we say we hate our life, but she did point out a few good examples of how tough it is to balance between rigor and fun. Now we're going to talk about center-based learning, and it sounded like the teacher, Miss Smith, did talk about some things that kind of sound like center-based learning, like things you would think about, like making the pudding, and I think the other one she was doing was the dance moves. Now I'm sure that was probably done with the class as a whole just by listening to the video. So that's where we're going to break it down and talk about how important it is to get that individual instruction in your centers. What did you guys think about the video? Do you guys ever feel like that in your classroom? Like you don't know if you're too rigorous, too fun, in the middle? What do you think?
Yes, I feel that way, Roy. I feel that way every day.
You know, and thankfully, you know, we do have a great leader here at Minnick, and she does do a lot of modeling, and you know, that's another consistent thing throughout the class as far as being a great leader, being a great teacher, you know, just modeling, showing the procedures every day. You know, hopefully, you know, all of us are basically a mere robot by the time we get done of what she would do, or hopefully the students will be doing what we're doing. So that's what we're going for, and that's our goal. Now, of course, not everything is going to work perfect all the time. Especially here at Minnick, we deal with students with behavior problems. So it's a lot of trial and error, and you never can just give up on something immediately. You never know what's going to happen. And then, you know, in a general ed classroom or inclusion, you know, whatever you're dealing with, things are not always going to go as planned. And, you know, just like you have to learn how to do things at your job, the kids have to learn the procedure and structured procedure in the classroom so they can be successful at this. You know, she said in the video, the kids don't know the parts of speech, but we had a blast. Well, that's where she's going to have to look and refine. And that's what I was going to mention as well. This is one of the books for one of my classes. It was only like a $15 buy. And it has a lot of great information that's not just pertaining to being a leader, but it's going to help you in your classroom with getting lesson plans that are up to date, differentiated. That's another big word we're going to talk about here. And it's really great advice on what things should be looking like in your classroom. And then, of course, the objectives of today is you'll understand how centers can be beneficial. You know, everything you do, you know, to make sure the kids learn it. And we've heard this from several other PDs we've had, from Ms. Cromer and a few others, that you have to have the kids involved. They have to be doing something. They have to be hands-on. And you need to have an I do, we do, you do. You know, of course, you know, traditional assessment, you sit down, you take a test. That's great, but we know that we're going to be losing that soon. I mean, the whole grading The outlook on grading is changing. So you're going to have to start thinking about the I do, we do, you do. You know, you're going to model, you do it as a group, and then hopefully your students can show that skill. Now we're going to talk about differentiation. Now I'm kind of hitting on a few things that aren't, you know, it's not center-based, but I wanted to mix it up and kind of give you guys a feel of what I've been doing for the last 2 years in hearing. You know, everyone is different. This is so important. I'm going to say this throughout the whole thing. We teach at Minute. It's way different here. But does it have to be different? You know, through structural procedure, hopefully it's not too different, and we can eventually get them back to school. But everyone starts out at a different level. All of us, when we got a job here, we're on a different level. We've all progressed. I can say that with confidence because I've seen everybody here, and we're all getting better. So, you know, Miss Long, our principal, or whoever couldn't do anything about what happened to us before, but when we got here, you have to deal with what you've got. So Confucius, you know, stated all learners are different in their readiness, and differentiation will make things a lot easier. It's very scary, and you think it's real modern and something maybe you're afraid of, but it will make things easier, and you'll see that throughout this. I've put the words in green because these are great words. These are words you want to see when you're talking about, you know, what are you doing for your students. Why use centers? It supports current research on adolescent development, motivates students, appeals to the social nature. You're going to want to remember that for something later. Basically, that's just saying it appeals to helping them in group activities, meets academic needs of individual students, and that's what we're going for here is individualized lesson plans. So this is a big push here at Minute, and I think it's across the board. It's not just here. Things are changing. Here's a big word that I couldn't pronounce for the last 2 years, and I still might murder it right now, but pedagogy. That's what I'm going to go with, pedagogy. I've asked a few classmates before the presentation because I knew I was going to be speaking about it. It's a big fancy word for making sure that your students learn and retain information. Now by doing that, you're going to have to tie in some of this kinesthetic stuff, group learning, hands-on, moving around, to make sure they're getting it. Another reason to use center is it plays a central role in DBDM. That's the acronym for database decision making. And as we know here with our SGA results, everything's based on data. You know, even in that little video, the principal kept saying, how do you know this? How do you know this? Well, that's where the data comes in. Basic model, you know, you have your standards curriculum assessment. Dr. Sanzo, one of my professors, you know, you got to get pedagogy in there. It's got to be in there, you know, they've got it before assessment. And you can put it anywhere there because pedagogy and assessment, they're kind of going to tie together. Your learning centers are designed activities to engage the students. You can have them work independently, they can work in small groups. You really have a lot to play with. And, you know, grouping's a big thing, and teachers know their students, so you group your students wisely so you can get the best effect. In one of the books, you know, Dewey and Piaget both assert that children actively construct their knowledge of the world, and they are active learners. Again, just reiterating some of the stuff I've said earlier that you've probably heard in a lot of other professional developments. And, you know, one thing that's really hard to argue is that centers do provide the context for teaching transformation as well as promoting fairness, harmony, inclusion, and academic excellence. Again, big words that we all should like to see, and we would like to be using these for our students. I can feel good about telling any parent that this is what we're offering your kid. Fairness, harmony, academic excellence. Now this is what, you know, a lot of people are thinking. When you hear center-based learning, I think back to kindergarten when I first started hearing about some of this, you know, doing stuff in centers, pandemonium, chaos. This is the way people think that it's going to work out. And it may look like this the first day. Hopefully not, but you never know. But then you're going to have to refine. And in reality, when you do it correctly and you build your kids' stamina to do centers on their own, you're going to have collaboration and teamwork. Don't get stuck on thinking that this is only for K through 8. And there's a thing at the end of the presentation where you'll see a lot of great examples of using this in high school. I'm not going to show them up here, but you've got it in your packet, and I'm going to show you up here. And then, of course, tranquility. This is the way we want every day to end. You know, one of the books that I read on center-based learning, you know, 2 teachers, they basically set up the daily 5 in reading and reading. And when they first tried it, well, before the daily 5, they would fail. They had everybody together. They tried to have some centers, but they were putting out fires, running around the room. And then, you know, once they got the centers in place and everybody was picking up on it, they talked about how peaceful their day was. If it was pretty outside, he's like, man, we're going to go enjoy this weather. You know, that's what we're all looking for. So hopefully that's where we can go with this. And, you know, I'll commend Mrs. Wampler. She has already been the big push for this here, and she's introduced us to a lot of different centers already. So she kind of knows a lot of this stuff. And I actually took one of the books from her. This is an example. This is some data. I mean, there's data out there, endless data that shows that this works. This is just one in California. It was like a lower school, a low performing school. And I mean, it's a little blurry and little up here, but basically the numbers below the 0 were whole class organization, kind of the old school method. And then when you look at the classes who did have activity centers and collaboration, the scores went up. And this is, you know, you don't want your research to look like this. This is an example of a bad research and a bad graph, but data all over the web does support this. And the key thing that you want to do when setting up centers, and that's why I put this graph up here, is you have to do it by the data. And that's what we're trying to do now, is use our student growth assessments and our PALS testing to model our reading, our language arts lesson plans. On establishing centers, I know you guys are probably getting tired of hearing me, so I'm going to try to get through this. You have to build stamina. You know, the first day, the centers may not last more than 3 minutes. You know, you have to build up to it, see how long they can be by themselves, and then work from there. Start small. You know, you don't want to use the biggest idea you can think of in case the kids destroy it or it just doesn't work out and you spend all this money or you put all these resources together. Model the expected procedure. You know, most likely you're going to have to model this for 2 to 3 weeks before you do it. And do it, you know, maybe do each center as a group, and then eventually you break it down to where they're doing it in individual groups. Decide when to use and frequency. You don't want to burn them out on it, but you do want to incorporate it, you know, quite often throughout the week. And then, as I stated earlier, you know, one of the books that you guys will see in one of the centers, the Daily 5, here you see the Daily 5, and basically those 2 ladies revolved all of their centers around this, and they cover all the SOLs. And all the students were engaged. You just walk in, it's like this most peaceful environment. Kids are over here reading together to each other. You know, she's over here leading an individual lesson with some students who are struggling. It's just very peaceful. And then for math, it's the same kind of principle. I gave you guys these handouts so you can take any subject and use reading and then branch out from that and do it in science, history. Even today, you'll see how I've tied in the reading with what I went over today in our center. If you want to maintain the stations, you know, teacher friendly, change the content, not the station. You know, today I've got a Jeopardy board over here. You know, that's great because you can do it on PowerPoint, but if you've got one that you made, you know, you can always change what's on it, but don't take out the station. I mean, once they learn it, you want them doing that. You know, you want to use the station that's most successful, and if it's successful, you want to keep it and just switch up the curriculum. Don't be afraid to fail. If you do, try again, reflect, use that formative data. Cycle I was talking about earlier, I mean, there's all kinds of cycles, but basically, you know, look at what you did, see how it went, and then refine it.
Pause a sec.